Gore, I should say, I beg your pardon. No, I don't know if Nader is endorsing Gore. That book showed, well, really it's a history of the Clinton administration and what Gore did within it, which was nothing particularly good. By the way, he was calling, quite eagerly, I think, for the invasion of Iraq back in 1998, as many Democrats were at that time. And I don't agree with, I have rather heterodox views on global warming. I mean, I think the world is getting warmer. I don't think human agency has anything to do with it. I mean, I do not believe that if we don't eat ice cream, which needs dry ice, which needs CO2, that we'll be improving the weather chances of the planet. I think the science of global warming, and my poor co-editor Jeffrey will be dying a million deaths when he hears me saying this, but that's what I feel. So I'm no fan of Gore's movie. I mean, I think the movie, and I think a lot of global warming is just shilling for the nuclear power industry, frankly. So that's it on. So Nader, Ralph, don't do it. Stop.
Camden, New Jersey.
Yes, hi. Am I through here?
Yep.
Hello?
I think so. You're on.
Okay, I'm on. Mr. Cockburn, I'm having some difficulties here. You're obviously very intellectual, and it's kind of disturbing to find you're telegraphing where your agenda really leaves you with that caller about a half hour ago who spoke about Israel, and you said something about your kind. I mean, that kind of telegraphs how you really feel. I mean, that's kind of an insulting remark. Your kind. What is your kind?
Your kind meant the kind, not it. I think you're trying to insinuate that I meant Jewish or something. Your kind are the people who go out saying that any critic of Israel is an anti-Semite, who suddenly start linking your name with people who deny the Holocaust. There are people who do that. I think they do it for completely cynical reasons, mostly. And there may be some completely wrong-headed person who genuinely believes there's not a shred of evidence at all for it. And I get exercised about it. I think it's absolutely outrageous, slur, and so when I say your kind, that's what I'm talking about.
What do you say to that, Camden?
I beg your pardon?
Go ahead.
Yeah, my problem is that when someone is so one-sided against Israel, then there is some justice for people.
I'm not one-sided against Israel. In fact, the people I should say one thing. If you go to our website, you consistently read people who are not sitting in Petrolia, California, or in Oregon City, which is where Jeffrey Sinclair is from, or Camden, New Jersey, which is where you are, sir, from, but people who are in Israel. We publish Yuri Avneri pretty much every week. We publish Jonathan Cook pretty much every week. We publish Gideon Levy. We publish people who write for Haaretz. So what you're seeing on our website is people in Israel who are writing from there, both Jews and Palestinians who are writing from there. So when we say we're one-sided, we're not one-sided. We are presenting issues which don't make it into the American mainstream. There's a big difference.
Camden?
Making the point that it's in Israel where both Jews and Arabs have free voice. There are millions.
They don't have free voice. That's something else again. They don't have free voice. You can read someone like Avneri, who's not an Arab, he's a Jew, will point out that inside Israel, and of course by 100 times more in the occupied territories, the voices aren't totally free. Actually, Avneri maybe would say in Israel itself that the Palestinians are more free, but Jonathan Cook, it's been shown time and again that it's not a perfect democracy. For one thing, most of the land can only be owned by Jews. That's not a perfect democracy at all. And it's getting worse, by the way, all the time, with extremists like Avigdor Lieberman proposing essentially that make it conditions almost impossible for Arabs inside Israel.
Camden, we'll wrap it up. Go ahead.
Please. It's interesting that you say Israel's not a perfect democracy. Therefore, what should we do? I mean, is it perfect?
Make it better. Make it better. Make it better.
Of course.
I believe the way it would be made better is actually by a secular, unified state. I don't actually think that the two nations theory is going to go very far.
It almost comes down to let's blame the Jews for everything.
No,
it is no
doubt. I'm not going to accept that. You've got a sort of script kind of you're reading from. You're not listening to a word I'm saying.
No script,
I believe so. I believe so. You're going to say that we're constant critics of Israel.
I see. So this is how we shut down discussion, right?
No, it's not. I think the discussion, from my point of view, has been shut down almost as long as I've been in the United States. So when I have an opportunity here to say what the issues are, to say that you can have a constructive division of the future of the Middle East without being immediately accused, as the gentleman from Hobe Sound, Florida, did, of being in favor of the Holocaust. No, you didn't. I think you're saying that we're extremely anti-Israel. You haven't actually said, I don't know what your views are, whether you think Israel is doing well or what. I think basically the discussion of Israel in almost every site in America is crippled by ignorance and by prejudice. So that therefore, when people talk about, the roadmap to peace, the information that's available for people even to know is not there. Because you cannot have a rational discussion about these issues in 99% of the U.S. press.
Following up on that, an emailer asks, what is your reaction to the Jimmy Carter book? Peace, Not Apartheid.
I think the Jimmy Carter book was very well taken. I think he did a fine job. It was amazing. I mean, to be honest with you, the word apartheid, which caused shock here, in Israel, South Africa, South African Jews years ago said, yes, in some ways apartheid is worse in the occupied territories in Israel than it was in South Africa, in some ways. I think it's tremendous that a former president should have actually put these things down. And I think it was very interesting that suddenly, when the lobby went after him, within seconds, a fairly well-respected former president was accused. I think, by the way, the critics overplayed their hand. Suddenly, Jimmy Carter was basically, an advocate of the concentration camps. Literally, that was said, because he actually, I think, intervened in some case with some joke. That he was in the pay of the Arabs. This, that, and the other thing. I mean, he was very careful. Actually, in a way, he gave a rather optimistic description of the situation in Israel proper, not in the occupied territories. But I think it's a sign that at least that book then, partly by the efforts of his critics, went to number 4 on, I think it went to number 4 on Amazon. It was really good. So it's a healthy sign.
We're going to take a short break, come back,
Okay.
take some more phone calls, and introduce our audience to your home, which is where?
My home is in Petrolia, Humboldt County, Northern California.
And where is that?
That is, if you look at the map of the United States, you go to California, you look at the bit that sticks out furthest into the Pacific Ocean, and you put your pencil point right on that tip, Cape Mendocino. That's pretty much where I live. It's about an hour and a half south of Eureka.
About as far away from Washington, D.C. as you can get? Is that
Well, you could
fair?
live in Hawaii, I guess, but then you're looking the other way. No, yeah, it's pretty far away from
And you write so much about public policy. Why do you live so far from?
I like the place. I can afford to live there. I love the country. In this day and age, you're on the internet. You can read you can read every paper in Washington, D.C. if you want to. You can read every paper in the world if you want to. I mean, it's true, I can't get on my bicycle and drive down if I wanted to and, I don't know, walk up to the Capitol and try and, talk to some. But you can do everything you want now, and you can live in congenial surroundings and, among people you like, doing things you like, and that's the way it is. I can afford it, too.
We will be back in just a few moments with more calls for Alexander Cockburn.
I basically am a country guy. I lived 10 years in London. I grew up in Ireland. I lived 10 years in London. I lived 10 years in New York. I lived in Key West for a while. I lived various Central California, and I came up here. And people, the days when you'd said, rural seclusion, the remote writer, in his rural fastness, coming out wearing a sort of belted mujik shirt like Leo Tolstoy, it's not really where it's at. I mean, with modern communications, you can wake up in the morning and read every newspaper on the planet. It's very different. I mean, we have here in Petrolia, in the winter we have power outages and all the rest of it. But, these days, personally, I don't particularly like living in cities. But but you've got a DSL line now. You've got every image in the world. Too many of them available to you. I can be in San Francisco in 5 hours. If I feel like, if I've got meetings and fly around. So that's where I'm at in what I do. And it's an ideal circumstance for me. I think I count myself pretty fortunate. I like old iron. This is an old 62 Plymouth Belvedere wagon. I've driven that across the States a couple of times. It's got a 318 wide block in it. Sleep in the back if you want. Plenty of room to look under the hood. As long as you keep the engine tuned, I think it's actually less polluting not to have a catalytic converter. As my friend Pierre Spray instructed, all the catalytic converter does is create sulfuric acid, which it then sprays all over the neighborhood after the hydrocarbons pass over the catalytic converter. And then, this is a car from the late 60s. Newport, 68 Newport two-door with a 383 engine in it. Which actually I got here on the West Coast. Drive it around, try not to get tickets in it. But I like to just drive around, drive across the country, meet lots of people. Modern cars, all cars look the same these days. They've got no character at all. You could drive thousands of miles in America and barely see an old car anymore, tucked in behind the wheels of their Hondas or their Toyotas. Few holdouts still try and support the American auto industry. Just go along in your older car. It'll cost a little bit more in gas, maybe. But then you haven't spent all the money in the first place. So it works out pretty good. And you feel you're driving along with something with a little character in it. That's done by my friend, the artist Steve Rogers. Done in high relief about a terrible massacre, basically sponsored by the United States on the Rio Sumpul, on the borders of Honduras. There are the soldiers doing the massacre, and there are the poor people, the peasants carrying the coffin. There's a lot of work by Steve Rogers around here. He's one of my favorite artists. And here's the old stable, which I built about 5 years ago, or friends of mine in the valley built. And there's Agnes, 17 years old, who is a thoroughbred Arab cross. Wonderful, wonderful horse. My mother bred horses. So I've always liked horses, ride Agnes every day. And here she's having her mid-morning snack. Come on, Jasper, come in this way. This is a rammed earth building, which we call the cider house, which we put up about 3-4 years ago. Rammed earth is a very old technique of ramming earth down. I think, like many writers, actually, I like thinking about things other than writing. And I like to build. This is a square building going into a dome, done by my friend and neighbor, Greg Smith. This is a frieze. Jasper's very pleased. He's in the picture. The preparation of cider, which Steve Rogers did. I think many people thought this was some kind of outpost of Al-Qaeda at one point, because it looked a little like a Middle Eastern mosque. But it's a nice, very nice building. I love to build. If I had enough money, I'd be like Ludwig II of Bavaria. I'd never stop building. I grew up in Ireland, and there were plenty of towers around, usually Norman keeps in various stages of ruin. There was also the old round towers. There was one in my home village of Ardmore. So I've always been kind of tower-oriented. So after being here a while in Petrolia, built a tower. Sort of tower-like, anyway. Out of mostly recycled redwood. And people who donate to Counterpunch or support us, we put them up in the tower. And they stay. They're very happy up there. There's no one around. So the tower has stayed in my life. I could shut myself up in the tower, I suppose, and emerge after 15 years with a very important piece of writing, but I'm more social, so I stay 300 feet lower down and talk to the animals, and the animals talk to me. Your Miserable Life as a Dog. Want to give me the first chapter? There have been books about dogs, you know, written by dogs. My Dog Tulip, one of the nicest books about a dog ever written. And Jasper here is secretly writing his memoirs. He's going to disclose the life of dictating novels, canine exploitation. There he goes.